So trauma is really interesting. Because of the self-defense work and the sacred sexuality work that I've done, I've encountered a lot of people who, and as an acupuncturist, a lot of people that have been through traumatic experiences, vets and women and all kinds of folks. And one of the things I believe, or I've noticed, is that all trauma happens in a high adrenaline state.
Okay.
So when we're traumatized, that we take on that imprint under high adrenaline. Either physical trauma or emotional trauma happens in a high adrenaline state. My conclusion about that is that there's two ways to navigate people that have been traumatized. And I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an expert in trauma, but these are just my personal observations, my personal beliefs. One way is to, when people have been traumatized, they're in a hyperadrenalized state, they have hypervigilance. So I've found that one way of treating that or dealing with that is to get them into a parasympathetic state is through things like hypnosis or meditation or benzodiazepines, or you want to get them, kava, herbs, you want to get them somatic awareness. Those are all ways that will help us bring us into a parasympathetic state. For some people that have been traumatized, that really works, but there are other people that are wrapped so tight that the minute they start to relax, they panic, right?
Because their vigilance center has to be kept high. They're afraid that thing is going to happen again, and they need to protect themselves.
So for like vets with PTSD, a lot of the common treatments don't work.
Right.
Things like acupuncture works great for some people. They totally relax the body. I mean, how you can get people to relax when you stick needles in them, I have no idea, but it works for some people. For some people, it doesn't work at all. And my experience has been that for those people where it doesn't work for them, another way of doing this is we create what we call sacred space, which is not religious or spiritual. It's more about creating a very safe emotional space. And within that emotional space, we will recreate the trauma in a safe environment, a safe supportive environment, but we give the body a different physical outcome. So if I was, like when I was a kid, I was assaulted and my face was pushed down into the snow and I was almost suffocated.
Wow.
So when I went through this myself, I had two guys on top of me. They're holding me down, pushing my face down into the mat. That'll recreate the trauma. So it's a high adrenaline state. But my body found a different physical outcome. In that scenario, my body found a way out to unwind because the trauma was locked into the physical helplessness. And if my body could find a way out of that, it seemed to help resolve the trauma.
All right. So when you're in the high adrenaline state, if you can run away or fight to survive, that doesn't create as much trauma. But if for some reason you can't run away and you can't fight and the trauma happens, that embeds it into your
or even if you are fighting
body.
back and you're still, so say you were beaten up and you were badly beaten up and you're traumatized by that, even if you were fighting back, you can recreate that state, but you give the body a chance to win.
Okay.
And in that winning, somehow the limbic system unravels the trauma. Now the trauma is still there. It doesn't go away. It just, my experience is it doesn't quite drive the bus. So this is what we do in our self-defense classes. This is what is done in Mankind Project, which is a male initiation, a male rite of initiation for adult males. We will create a situation where we can recreate trauma and then give it a different physical outcome. Peter Levine is doing a lot of work with this in Longmont, Colorado. So he has a book called Waking the Tiger, really great book.
Love that book, so good.
So that's another possible way of dealing with adrenaline, sympathetic, parasympathetic response.
It's just redoing the scenario in a way that you win.
Exactly, physically win.
Yeah, you physically win. Amazing.
Yeah.
You have some amazing self-defense classes. Tell me more about them.
The self-defense that I teach is called FAST Defense, Fear Adrenal Stress Training. And one of the things that we do is we will teach self-defense in high adrenaline states. And the intention of the self-defense classes are not to resolve trauma, but kind of a side benefit is I've seen that happen many, many, many times, even though it's not designed for that. We're not psychologists, we're not trauma specialists, we're self-defense specialists. But the way we do the scenario-based, high adrenaline, full contact self-defense is just what we described, where you'll have a scenario, we'll recreate a scenario, and then when people fight their way out of it, it seems to resolve trauma in the body. This work originally came from a man named Matt Thomas, who was badly assaulted as a child, and anyway, it's sort of a long story, but he was badly assaulted as a child, became a black belt. One of the women in his black belt dojo was attacked, and he felt like the self-defense training was inadequate. So he created something called role model mugging, which then became model mugging. And what I teach is called fast defense, which is a spin-off of model mugging. It was created by Bill Kipp and Peyton Quinn.
Okay, so how long does it take? I've taken martial arts classes because I've been traumatized many times. And I always had this sense that if I could just learn to defend myself, that I'd be safe, and that I could also kind of let my vigilance center down, and I wouldn't have to be so wound up being afraid that I was going to, be in that situation again.
Right.
And so I took martial arts, I took fighting classes, I took all sorts of things, and it seems like I put a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of practice into it, but I never felt confident that I could protect myself. How long does it take for you to train a woman to be able to protect herself in a way that she can let her vigilance center come down and she can feel confident that she's able to protect herself?
Right. Well, there's no guarantees, of course,
Sure.
about anything. But, the original model mugging classes were 5 weekends. There were 4 weekends of instruction, and then 1 weekend of a public demonstration of the work and a celebration for the women. Bill Kipp took all that work and condensed it into 6-hour blocks. So within 1 or 2 6-hour blocks, we can repattern the limbic system. See, what happens is when we're in fight, flight, or freeze, many people in a tense situation will freeze. That's a natural response, but it doesn't always serve us. So in our self-defense classes, we bypass the freeze response. And so what happens is we will recreate the high adrenaline state in a safe space, and then we create a scenario where people get used to navigating their bodies in a high adrenaline state. Under adrenaline, we lose fine motor control. So in our classes, we recreate the adrenaline state using very specific techniques, and we just use large muscle groups, so people aren't reliant on fancy techniques. It's all what I call assholes and elbows, right? It's basic big muscle groups, and the statistics that we've come across from women that have been through the class are very, very encouraging. And Matt Thomas has done some research on that. So we bring people up slowly. It's a very safe, supportive environment where we bring them up slowly through the adrenal states. As they get more successful, we add another piece to it. They get more successful with that. And pretty soon, it's in their limbic system. Because trauma is created in a high adrenaline state, the solution to trauma is created in a high adrenaline state. And that, because we bypass the freeze response. Many times after women have been assaulted, after taking the class, they don't even remember what they did, but they've knocked their attacker out.
Okay, so a woman could literally learn this in a weekend.
Yes.
And how long can she retain that information? Does she need to keep taking classes, brush up classes, to keep her, ready to honed and ready to protect herself? Or
well, it's always a good idea. Yeah, but I believe we've had people as long as 15 or 20 years later still been able to call up the responses when needed. So
it's relatively, so you can learn it in a weekend, and it's relatively permanently.
I don't know if it's permanent, but we've had long periods of time where people, the woman I teach with, Sabrina Mata, she was assaulted down at a beach here, and she knocked her attacker out cold within about 5 seconds, and that's very common. It's incredibly common that the women will, and their body goes into autopilot. They just react. They don't even know what they're doing because we trained it in that high adrenaline state. Boom, it's there.
So you don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
Wow.
The adrenaline is the anchor to the response.
Amazing.
Yeah.